I stood in the corner of the elegant restaurant watching my mother smile for photos at her 60th birthday celebration. The room buzzed with laughter and congratulations. My heart raced with hope that tonight might finally bridge the gap between us. When dinner ended, she tapped her glass and began her speech. Her eyes sparkled with pride as she spoke. I have two wonderful sons. James, my brilliant surgeon. Michael, my successful lawyer. Then she paused, looking at me. And one who... Her voice trailed off. My chest tightened as I saw pity in the guest's eyes. If you are watching this video, please let me know where you are tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join me on this journey of family expectations, personal worth, and what happened after that painful pause. Growing up in the Thompson household meant one thing above all else: achievement. My father, Richard, a tenured university professor with 3 published textbooks, established the standard early. My mother, Catherine, who worked her way up to hospital administrator, reinforced it daily. Our suburban Chicago home might have looked normal from the outside, but inside it operated like an academic training ground. James, 4 years my senior, showed surgical precision, even as a child. His science fair projects won state competitions. Michael, just 2 years older than me, displayed the argumentative skills that would later serve him in courtrooms. Both fulfilled the Thompson legacy perfectly. I was different. While they built model rockets and debated politics, I filled notebooks with stories and sketches. My 3rd grade teacher called my parents after I submitted a 20-page illustrated adventure story, instead of the assigned 1-paragraph book report. Mom and Dad sat me down that evening. Samuel, Mrs. Johnson showed us your story, my mother began, her tone measured. It is very creative. Is that bad? I asked, confused by their serious expressions. No, son, Dad said, adjusting his glasses. But you need to learn to follow directions. College admissions officers look for students who excel within established parameters. Even at 8 years old, I understood the subtext. My creativity was acceptable as a hobby, but not as a focus. Throughout elementary school, I tried balancing their expectations with my interests. I maintained straight, as in core subjects, while secretly working on stories during lunch breaks. My 5th grade science project on plant growth won 1st place, earning a rare smile from Dad. I celebrated by writing a short story about a boy who could talk to plants. Middle school brought new challenges. James entered a prestigious university on a full academic scholarship, while Michael became captain of the debate team. Family dinners centered around their accomplishments, with occasional questions about my grades. I joined the school newspaper, hoping journalism might bridge my love of writing with their desire for practicality. When my feature article won a regional student press award, I rushed home with the certificate. That is nice, Samuel, Mom said, barely glancing at it before returning to her medical journal. Have you started preparing for your algebra test? The pattern continued through high school. While my brother's trajectory remained steadily upward, I struggled to find approval. My creative writing teacher submitted my short story to a young authors competition without telling me. When I won and showed my parents the notification letter, Dad nodded. Good. This will look good on college applications. Speaking of which, we should discuss universities. Harvard has an excellent English department that could prepare you for law school. But I want to study creative writing, I argued. Maybe at Northwestern, or... Your brothers both attended Ivy League schools, Mom interrupted. The connections you make there will serve you throughout your career. The argument escalated over weeks. I researched writing programs while they left brochures for Harvard and Yale on my bed. The tension culminated in a dinner table confrontation during my senior year. I am not going to waste 4 years studying something I hate, I shouted, surprising even myself with the outburst. Writing stories is not a career path, Samuel, Dad replied calmly. It is a hobby. People make careers as writers all the time, I countered. And how many succeed, Mom asked. How many end up waiting tables, while their manuscripts collect rejection letters? The silence that followed contained their unspoken message. Their sons did not take risks. Their sons followed proven paths to success. We eventually compromised. I would attend Cornell, their acceptable alternative to Harvard, but major in English, with a creative writing concentration. They would pay my tuition as long as I maintained a 3.5 gigapascals and took business classes as electives. I accepted believing I could prove my path valid through success. College brought temporary freedom. Away from direct family pressure, I thrived in writing workshops and literature courses. My professors praised my work. One urged me to submit stories to literary magazines. For 4 years, I balanced their expectations with my passion, graduating with honors and a portfolio of published short fiction. The real divide began after graduation. James completed his surgical residency at Massachusetts General Hospital. Michael graduated from law school and joined a prestigious Chicago firm. I moved into a cramped New York apartment with 2 roommates and began submitting my novel manuscript to publishers. The rejection letters arrived weekly during that first year after college. Form letters at first, occasionally with handwritten notes suggesting potential but declining representation. Each one stung, but I persisted, working multiple jobs to support my writing. Monday through Friday, I opened the local bookstore, arranging displays of successful authors, while dreaming of seeing my name on a spine. Weekends found me at a busy coffee shop serving lattes to professionals enjoying their days off while I worked doubles. Evenings and any spare moment between shifts, I wrote and revised my manuscript. Monthly calls with my parents became exercises in deflection. "How is the job search going?" Mom would ask, despite knowing I was employed. "I am working at Thornfield Books and Westside Cafe," I would answer, adding, "and I just submitted my manuscript to 3 more publishers." "You know your father has connections at several marketing firms," she would continue, as if I had not spoken. "With your Cornell degree, you could start at an entry-level position with actual advancement potential." "James called last week," she might add. "He is performing his first solo cardiac procedure next month." And Michael made junior partner. "They both asked about you." The subtext beneath her words burned like acid. "When are you going to get serious? When will you stop disappointing us?" I met Allison during my 2nd year in New York. She came to the bookstore poetry reading I had organized, staying afterward to discuss the featured poet. Her insightful questions and genuine interest in literature drew me immediately. When I mentioned I was a writer, she asked about my work without the skeptical expression I had grown accustomed to from others. Our relationship developed quickly. She was a graphic designer for a small publishing house, creative but pragmatic. Her tiny Brooklyn apartment became my sanctuary from the pressures of family expectations and financial struggles. She read my rejections letters without pity, then helped me revise and improve my submissions. "You have something special, Samuel," she insisted after reading my latest revision. "These publishers just cannot see it yet." Her faith sustained me through the 3rd round of rejections. While Allison saw potential, my family saw only failure. Thanksgiving that year brought matters to a head. I scraped together airfare to Chicago, hoping that bringing Allison might buffer the usual criticism. The strategy failed spectacularly. Mom organized a celebration dinner for Michael passing the bar exam, scheduling it for the evening of our arrival. The table conversation centered entirely around my brother's achievements. "James just received a research grant," Mom announced, beaming, "and Michael won his first major case last month." "How wonderful," Aunt Patricia commented before turning to me. "And Samuel, what are you up to these days?" Before I could answer, Mom interjected, "He is still writing those stories of his." She gave a tight smile. "But he has a good job at a bookstore, too." "Actually, I just had a short story accepted by the New Yorker," I said quietly. The momentary silence broke when Dad asked James about his research project. Later that night, Allison found me on the back porch, staring at nothing. "They did not even acknowledge it," I said when she sat beside me. "The New Yorker is one of the most prestigious literary publications in the country, and they dismissed it like I mentioned getting a participation trophy in Little League." "Their approval is not what matters," she replied, taking my hand. "Your talent is real, regardless of whether they recognize it." That publication led to others. A literary agent expressed interest in my novel. My online following grew, as I published stories and essays on my blog, connecting with readers who appreciated my perspective. Yet with each small success, my communication with my family diminished. Holiday visits became shorter. Phone calls grew infrequent. I established a life independent of their validation. Allison and I moved in together. My agent secured a deal for my first novel with a small but respected publisher. When the advance copies arrived, I sent one to my parents with a personal inscription. They never mentioned receiving it. Then the invitation arrived. My mother was turning 60, and they were planning a formal celebration at La Maison Chicago, most exclusive French restaurant. Despite my reservations, Allison encouraged me to attend. This could be a chance to reset, she suggested. Plus, you have news they cannot ignore. She referred to my recent book deal. After years of persistent work, a major publisher had offered a 2-book contract based on the modest but critical success of my debut novel. The advance was substantial enough that I could write full-time. The publishing date coincided with Mom's birthday weekend. Perhaps Allison was right. Perhaps this tangible success measured in dollars and corporate backing would finally earn their respect. I called to confirm our attendance, allowing myself to hope for reconciliation. The night of my mother's 60th birthday arrived with perfect meteorological symbolism. A spring storm pounded Chicago thunder, punctuating the tense atmosphere in the private dining room of La Maison. Allison and I entered rain, dampened but optimistic, into a gathering of extended family and my parents' closest friends. Aunt Patricia spotted us first, rushing over with genuine warmth. "My favorite writer-nephew," she exclaimed, embracing me tightly. "I just finished your novel." Could not put it down. Her enthusiasm drew attention, including brief nods from my parents across the room. They were surrounded by admirers, Mom resplendent in a deep blue dress, Dad distinguished in his tailored suit. They looked like royalty holding court. James approached next, champagne flute in hand. His surgical precision now extended to his appearance. Perfect haircut, impeccably fitted tuxedo, Italian leather shoes. "Little brother," he said with a smile that almost reached his eyes. "Good to see you. Congratulations on your cardiac research," I replied sincerely. "That journal article was impressive even to a literary mind like mine." He chuckled, seeming momentarily uncomfortable. "You know how it is. Publish or perish in my world." Something in his tone suggested discontent, but before I could pursue it, Michael appeared, arm around his model, gorgeous date. The lawyer brother had perfected the art of confident charm, his handshake firm, his eye contact fleeting as he scanned the room for more important connections. "Samuel, welcome back to the world of gainful employment," he joked, an edge beneath his words. "How is the writing hobby treating you?" "Actually, I just signed a major 2-book deal with Atlantic Publishing," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I wanted to tell Mom and Dad tonight." Michael's eyebrows raised slightly. "Well, good for you. Speaking of news, I just made full partner youngest in firm history. Mom is thrilled." The conversation shifted to his accomplishments, my news forgotten. The pattern was so familiar it almost felt comfortable. Almost. Throughout dinner, I tried 3 times to mention my book deal. Each attempt was intercepted by other announcements or deflected with polite disinterest. By dessert, a familiar knot of frustration tightened in my chest. Then came the moment. Mom stood, champagne glass raised, commanding attention, effortlessly, as she had throughout my childhood. "Thank you all for celebrating this milestone with me," she began. "At 60, I find myself reflecting on my greatest accomplishments." She gestured toward our table. "My family tops that list, particularly my sons." The room grew quiet. I felt Allison's hand slip into mine beneath the tablecloth. "I have been truly blessed," Mom continued. "I have 2 wonderful sons. James, my brilliant surgeon saving lives at Massachusetts General." She nodded toward him, pride emanating from her entire being. Next, she turned to Michael. "And Michael, my successful lawyer, making partner at just 32. Her voice carried maternal pride that I recognized but had never experienced. Then she turned toward me. The slight hesitation was imperceptible to most, but I had spent a lifetime attuned to her subtle cues of disappointment. "And one who—" She paused, searching for words. "One who is still finding his way." The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Allison's grip tightened painfully. The polite smiles around us contained unmistakable pity. In that moment, the accumulated weight of never being enough, of being the family disappointment, crashed down with unbearable force. I excused myself, navigating to the restroom on autopilot, locking the door behind me. The marble countertop supported my weight, As I leaned forward, struggling to breathe through the tightness in my chest, the face in the mirror looked unfamiliar. When had I started resembling my father so closely? When had these lines of tension become permanent fixtures around my eyes? I splashed cold water on my face, trying to regain composure. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A notification from my agent. Your novel just hit the Amazon bestseller list in literary fiction. Pre-orders are through the roof after that New York Review mention. I stared at the message, the contrast between professional validation and familial rejection, creating cognitive dissonance. Outside this bathroom, I was the family failure, the son still finding his way. Online readers connected deeply with my words, critics praised my voice, and a major publisher had invested substantially in my future. The revelation struck with sudden clarity. No achievement would ever be enough. No success would translate into their version of accomplishment. The path to their approval was not just difficult, it was non-existent. I stood straighter, a decision crystallizing. I would no longer measure my worth through their narrow lens. I had spent years contorting myself to fit expectations that fundamentally contradicted who I was. The exhaustion of that effort suddenly felt unnecessary and obsolete. When I returned to the dining room, the celebration continued. Speeches from colleagues praised my mother's accomplishments. Friends recounted amusing anecdotes from her past. I listened, waiting for the right moment, newfound determination steadying my nerves. As the formal program concluded and guests began mingling, I approached the microphone, ignoring my father's warning glance. I would like to say something about my mother. I announced, my voice carrying across the room. Conversations hushed as attention turned toward me. Mom looked surprised, perhaps concerned about what her disappointed son might say in public. For my entire life, I began, you have defined success in specific, rigid terms. Medicine, law, academia. These were the only acceptable paths. I paused, meeting her gaze directly. Tonight you described me as still finding my way, as if I were wandering lost without purpose or achievement. The room grew uncomfortably silent. Allison had moved to stand near the exit, ready to support a hasty departure if needed. What you never understood, I continued, is that I found my way long ago. I chose a different path, not because I could not succeed on yours, but because it would have destroyed the person I actually am. I held up my phone, showing the notification. My novel just hit the Amazon bestseller list. The 2-book contract I signed last week came with an advance that exceeds Michael's starting salary at his law firm. The New York Review called my work important and transformative. My voice remained steady, though emotion threatened to overwhelm me. But even if none of that were true, even if I were still working at that bookstore and cafe, writing in stolen moments, and collecting rejection letters, I would still be successful because I remained true to myself despite unrelenting pressure to be someone else. I looked around the room at the shocked faces of relatives and friends. For years, I believed something was wrong with me for not fitting into the mold you created. Tonight, I realized the mold itself was flawed, not me. Without waiting for a response, I placed the microphone on the table, took Allison's hand, and walked out of La Maison into the stormy Chicago night, leaving behind 30 years of inadequacy and embracing the unwritten chapters ahead. The weeks following my mother's birthday speech passed in a blur of professional advancement and personal recalibration. Back in New York, separated by distance and choice from my family, I focused on final edits for my upcoming book release. Allison created space for me to process the complex emotions swirling in the aftermath of my public declaration. "No regrets?" she asked one evening as we walked through Brooklyn, the city lights reflecting off the East River. "None," I replied with certainty. It was 30 years overdue. The silence from my parents spoke volumes. No angry calls, no demands for apology, just profound absence. James surprisingly sent a brief text 3 days after the event. That took guts. "We should talk sometime." My Aunt Patricia called frequently, her support unwavering. "Your mother is processing," she explained during one conversation. "She has spent decades believing there is only one path to success. You challenged her entire worldview in front of everyone she respects." My book launched to critical acclaim and strong sales. The publisher accelerated plans for publicity, sending me on a 10-city tour. Standing before audiences who connected with my work provided healing I never anticipated. Each person who approached with a personal story of how my writing resonated with them helped rebuild my sense of worthiness. During the Chicago stop of my tour, James attended incognito, sitting in the back row. We met afterward at a quiet bar near the bookstore. "I almost did not recognize you without the lab coat," I joked as we settled into a corner booth. He smiled wearily. "I almost did not recognize myself lately." Over whiskeys, my seemingly perfect brother confessed his growing disillusionment with his surgical career. The prestige and parental approval came at costs he never anticipated. 80-hour weeks, failed relationships, and increasing detachment from the passion that initially drew him to medicine. "Sometimes I wonder if you had it right all along," he admitted, staring into his glass. "You chose the harder path in the short term, but now I wake up eager to work I finished for him. I love what I do even on difficult days." "Exactly," he sighed. "I cannot remember the last time I felt that way." We talked until closing time, two brothers reconnecting as adults rather than competitors in our parents' approval Olympics. Before parting, he hesitated, then pulled an envelope from his jacket. "Mom asked me to give you this," he said. "She is not ready to deliver it personally." Alone in my hotel room later, I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside, a newspaper clipping from the Chicago Tribune book review section. My novel featured prominently with the headline, "Local author makes splash with debut novel." Mom had circled my name in red pen. No note accompanied the clipping, but the gesture contained multitudes. Months passed. My second book took shape, while the first continued gaining readers. Michael called occasionally, our conversations gradually becoming less superficial. He admitted to curiosity about my writing process, even downloading my audiobook for his commute. Small steps toward genuine connection. Thanksgiving approached with the inevitable question of where to spend it. Allison and I discussed options, ultimately deciding to host our own gathering for friends in similar family situations. 2 days before the holiday, my phone rang with my mother number. Our conversation began awkwardly, neither directly addressing the elephant between us. She commented on the weather, asked about New York, mentioned a recipe she was considering. Finally, after several minutes of small talk, she cleared her throat. "Your father and I read your book," she said quietly. I held my breath, waiting. "It was." She paused. "It was excellent, Samuel. We are proud of you." The words I had waited decades to hear arrived without fanfare, delivered in her characteristically restrained manner. Yet they penetrated layers of hurt, beginning a healing process I had not known I still needed. "Would you and Allison consider coming for Christmas?" she asked before ending the call. No pressure, just family. That December visit marked a turning point. The family home felt different, not because it had changed, but because I entered it changed. My parents made visible efforts, however imperfect. My novel occupied a prominent position on their living room bookshelf. Dad asked thoughtful questions about my writing process. Mom showed Allison my childhood stories she had preserved in a box all these years. The following spring, Allison and I married in a small ceremony in Central Park. My family attended, their presence no longer overshadowing my joy but complementing it. During the reception, my mother requested the microphone for a toast. Family and friends held collective breath, perhaps remembering the last time she spoke publicly about her sons. She looked directly at me, something vulnerable in her expression I had rarely witnessed. "I have 3 remarkable sons," she began, her voice steady. "Each has taught me something essential. From James, I learned the value of precision and care. From Michael, the importance of advocacy and persuasion." She paused, her eyes glistening. "And from Samuel, perhaps the most important lesson of all. The courage to define success on your own terms, and the strength to remain true to yourself when others, including your mother, fail to see your vision." She raised her glass. "To Samuel and Allison, may you write your story together, with love, authenticity, and the wisdom to let others do the same." Later that evening, as guests danced under string lights, Dad approached me. We stood quietly watching the celebration before he spoke. "I was wrong about your path," he admitted. "I confused my own definitions of success with what would actually bring you fulfillment." "Better late than never," I replied, meaning it. 3 years have passed since that birthday speech. My third book publishes next month. Allison and I are expecting our first child. James ultimately left surgery to pursue medical research, finding greater satisfaction in laboratory work. Michael remains at his law firm but has taken on more pro bono cases, reconnecting with his original motivation to practice law. Mom just turned 63. At her small celebration dinner, she proudly introduced me to her friends as her son, the award-winning author. The qualifier of success no longer necessary, simply implicit in the pride with which she said my name. I learned that validation must ultimately come from within. Family approval is a gift when offered, but its absence needn't define your worth. Success looks different for each person. The most destructive prison is trying to thrive in someone else's vision for your life, rather than pursuing your own. What expectations have others placed on you that contradict your authentic self? Have you ever had to stand up to family pressure to follow your true path? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to hear more stories like this, and share with someone who might need permission to define success on their own terms. Thank you for joining me on this journey of finding my way, which turned out to be exactly where I needed to go all along.